What's going on, guys? It's Rebel Tanker, and welcome back to Axis and Allies 1940, turn 4 for the Allies. Alright, it has been quite the turn for the Allies. So, let's get going. Alright, first we'll start in the Mediterranean theater. Come down here. First we'll start the British Army, the British 8th Army in Egypt, attacked the remaining Italian forces here in Alexandria. It was a rousing success for the Brits. They killed, they brought some troops. They brought the cruiser and transport from one of the transports, and the cruiser from 81 picked up an infantry and an artillery from the Army Card. Came up here so they could use the offshore bombardment. Can't find a good place to set my camera down. Okay. So, the casualties from Alexandria. So, the offshore bombardment hit a Italian artillery. And then the casualties followed with one more Italian artillery, 2 tanks, 2 fighters. And the Allies lost 3 infantry, 1 French, and 2 British. And with the recapture of Alexandria, Britain got their bonus back for controlling all their European territories. So good for them. Rounding off the Mediterranean campaign was a rousing Allied invasion of southern Europe. So the 2 transports that were in 81. Again, with doing simultaneous, it kind of allowing for it allows for multi-international attacks for a lot of stuff. So the 2 transports went took a French infantry from Egypt, went 1, 2, grabbed the other 3 French infantry from Libya. So 1, 2, 3 for the land, and then the U.S. brought in their force of 3 infantry, 3 mech, and 1 artillery. Actually, there was more than that. No, that was it. That was the American force. All right, so initially the offshore bombardment was only carried out by a battleship and a cruiser. This 3rd cruiser came in on the non-combat. So for the offshore bombardment, both ships hit, and there were 2 Italian AAA that took the hits. And then in the ensuing combat, the Allies killed 3 more Italian infantry and killed an Italian fighter, and the Allies lost two French infantry. So the French went in with 4 infantry. They took the 2 casualties, so they are down to 2 infantry. The zone went to the United States, so the United States was also able to, not for this turn, but for next turn, the U.S. would be able to add 16 IPC to the bank. Okay, that's all the combat in the Mediterranean theater. Coming over to Russia, there was no combat in Russia. The Russians decided that they were not going to pursue any combat up here in the theater. They pulled their army out back into Bryansk, sent some forces into the Ukraine, left a blocker in West Ukraine. And that is sort of the state of the Russian front. Coming down to the Mediterranean theater, only the Brits. The Russians came in later. The Russians came in on the non-combat. But the Brits sent these 2 infantry and 2 artillery into Iraq to face off against the 3 defensive armies there. The Brits got extremely lucky. They killed the 3 Iraqi infantry at no loss to themselves. Very, very lucky. All right, so then before we go over to Asia, I can just go over the non-combats in Europe real quick. The U.S. brought more reinforcements over here to Morocco. That Brit fighter is not supposed to be there. That Brit fighter is actually supposed to be where he was supposed to go to Malta. So the Brits brought their fighter to Malta. The U.S. brought in their reinforcements from Brazil and the eastern United States. So the 42nd Infantry and the 9th Infantry are on the ground in Morocco with 2 AAA. The Brits and French sent their battleship and cruiser back up to Sea Zone 109. The Brits brought their planes. The Brits and French brought their planes from the Alexandria battle back to Cairo, and the Russians moved their infantry into Iraq. Okay, going over to the China theater. A lot of movement in the China theater this turn. And I'm missing an infantry piece over here in the China theater. But, okay, so the Brits went into Szechuan. They attacked 2 Japanese infantry and 2 Japanese artillery. They went in with 5 infantry. They went in with 5 infantry and artillery, 2 British fighters, 1 Anzac fighter, and a tactical bomber. They killed all the Japanese units at, again, no loss to them. They got really lucky. Then the Allies spread out and did walk-ons into Quichao, Hunan, and Guangxi. And then the Anzac forces here in Siam and the Shan State loaded up onto 2 transports, came up here and attacked Hong Kong, killed a lone Japanese tank defending it, and the Japanese tanks, luckily, the Japanese tank missed. And so Hong Kong went back to the Far East Command, which brought the Far East Command back their 5 IPC for their extra bonuses. And then that was it for attacks. Non-combats, the Brits moved their 4 tanks to Yan'an. Let's see here. What else did the Brits do? They moved these 2 infantry and transport from South Africa up here to West India. And that was pretty much it for Asia. No real movement here except that the Anzacs moved their fighter to the Solomons. And then the U.S. consolidated their fleet in the north here. All right. Purchases. Go down the line again. All right, so the Soviets, real quick, had 38 to spend. They put 10 infantry in Moscow, 2 infantry in the Ukraine, saved 2, and then at the end of the turn, they collected 33, plus the 2 saved, plus 5 for bonuses, and the Soviets will have 40 for next turn. All right, the United States, they had 72 to spend in Europe. They bought an infantry, artillery, and transport. Oh, sorry. So the infantry is being flagged under the 29th Infantry Division, and the armor is being flagged under the 3rd Armored Division. And then over in the Pacific, the U.S. bought 5 more destroyers and a carrier. And then at the end of the turn, the U.S. collected 54 plus 15 for bonuses, and then plus the 16 that they got for taking Rome. So the U.S. ended their turn with 85 IPC. China had 14 to spend. They bought 4 infantry, placed them here in Yan'an, and then at the end, and then saved 2. At the end of the turn, they collected 7 IPC plus the 2 saved, plus 6 for bonus, and so they will have 15 for next turn. I do need to get a British infantry on here. All right, the UK. The UK had 34 to spend. Up in London, they purchased a tank and another fighter. And then in Canada, they purchased a transport. And then in Persia, they bought a tank and an infantry. And then at the end of the turn, the UK had collected 33 plus the 2 that they saved, plus 5 for bonuses. So the UK has 40 IPC for next turn. Far East Command. The Far East Command had 22 to spend. They bought 2 tanks and a fighter. Then at the end of the turn, they collected 17 plus 5 for bonuses, so they have 22 for next turn. Anzacs had 28 to spend this turn. They bought an airfield for the Solomon Islands and then bought a miner for Queensland. And then at the end of the turn, they collected 18 IPC plus 10 for bonuses, and they did save 1 IPC, so the Anzacs will have 29 IPC to spend next turn. And then, as always, the French can't buy, can't build, can't do anything. So that was the French. All right. Well, that is it for turn 4. Coming up to the top of the board here now, we can see that the Axis were pushed back in their amount, in the number of victory cities that they now controlled. The Axis have been pushed back down to 4 victory cities per side of the board, so the Allies are doing well in keeping the victory cities out of did a good job this turn reclaiming victory cities from the Axis. Alright, well that is it for turn 4, and we will see you guys next time for turn 5. So until then, guys, as always, take care.